Okay, let's talk about peachy books.
Hell yeah.
So, well, I'll just start. Why
Please
not?
do. I'm so curious what you read.
As my peachy book, Haruki Murakami's manga stories. Haruki Murakami was born in Kyoto, Japan, in 1949. After college, he opened a small jazz bar, which he and his wife ran for 7 years. His first novel, Hear the Wind Sing, won the Gunzuo Literature Prize for Budding Writers in 1979 and launched his career. Manga Stories was published in 2023, was adapted by Jean-Christophe Devenny, and was illustrated by PMGL. You will recall I bought this quite recently. I guess it's not as recent as one would like to believe. It was around Christmas.
Okay.
Which I guess now was like almost 3 months ago.
That's okay.
Time's a flying.
Yes.
But this is, I think, a perfectly peachy book.
Yeah, the cover is insanely peachy. I love it.
I was like, I had a couple of different, actually, I have them here because I had picked out a bunch of peachy books, so maybe it's fun to show you the ones I didn't read. A Complicated Kindness is very peachy, but I felt like it was more orange.
Yeah, yeah.
Expectation by Anna
that's
Hope.
Perfect peach.
This one's pretty peachy. I think this would have been a good choice. People from My Neighborhood, but it's so short that I felt like maybe I was cheating.
Yeah.
For some reason. And then The Last Children of Tokyo is actually quite peachy as well.
Yeah.
So these were all of my peachy-ish choices, which it was a fun way to pick a read.
Totally.
But I just felt like this really was the most peachy of the books.
agree.
Like the top is a perfect peach, but then you also have the pink and the yellow.
Yeah.
That just felt the whole thing was very
It's awesome.
peach. Yeah. Anyhow, so this is a collection of 4 of Haruki Murakami's short stories adapted into graphic stories. So they were all illustrated, and I felt middling about it, quite frankly. I have read a few different collections of graphic novel short stories. Like, they are short stories, graphic stories? I don't know what
Short
to call
graphic
them.
stories, graphic short
Short graphic
stories.
stories. I don't know exactly.
What's the best way to say that?
I've read a couple of them. And they very rarely work for me. And so maybe I should just stop trying. But basically, all of these stories ended in a really vague way.
Yeah.
Like a really vague way, which happens often with short stories where they just like end and you're like,
Yeah.
okay,
What was the point? What actually happened?
Yeah. That's how I felt about every single one
damn.
of these. I kept thinking like, okay, that one ended a bit vague, but then maybe the next one won't. Okay, that one also ended a bit vague, but maybe the next one won't. And all 4 of them ended really vaguely. And I don't like that. I just find it really unsatisfying.
Yeah.
And I just am like, you're just trying to be literary. You're just trying to be like, oh, and that's the way life is. And I'm like, what is? Huh? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, like you can do that once in a while, but not on every story. And maybe
Not
that was just like
consistently.
poorly chosen stories of his to put in a
totally.
collection together.
Totally. I would also say I didn't see a running theme throughout
Yeah.
the 4 stories. Like I was like, I'm like, why these 4? They're all interesting, but I don't understand why them together were chosen. There didn't seem
Right.
to be a cohesive theme of any description, and there's no forward or afterward by the publisher explaining why these stories were chosen. So I just on the back it just says his best loved short stories, these iconic short stories. So I'm like, maybe these are just some really popular
Yeah,
ones.
I guess. I mean, can I see the cover for a second? I just want to see if I've read
Yes.
any of the others. So we've got Super Frog Saves Tokyo, which I
Frog
have
Saves
read.
Tokyo.
Where I'm likely to find it. Birthday Girl,
and the Seventh
No, I don't think I've read the other 3, but Super Frog Saves Tokyo was in after the quake, which I read right at the end of December, and I really liked that one. But in the context of that collection, it made a lot of sense. I feel like not knowing the other 3 stories you read, I'm like, I don't know how that would
They're
work.
all completely different, and yeah, I just found it quite, like I said, middling. I enjoyed certain moments, but overall I can't really recommend it unless if you're a big Haruki Murakami fan, then I would definitely recommend it because it's cool to see his stories come to life. And maybe it would have been cooler if I'd read these stories beforehand, but I just happened to not have encountered these stories of his before.
Yeah.
Birthday Girl was a really cool story. Basically, it's about this waitress who works at this restaurant where no one's ever met the owner, and the manager of the restaurant every day at 8 p.m. takes the owner his dinner, like down a long hallway into his house room. It's kind of like in an apartment building. He takes his dinner and delivers it. But this one day on the main character's birthday, the manager has like a medical episode and has to be taken to the hospital, and he grabs the main character and he's like, take him his dinner, you have to say this, and because no one else has ever seen the owner, no one else has ever done this in like over a decade. He's the only one who's ever seen him. So she goes to the owner with the tray, and she's like, God, I don't know what to expect. And he opens the door, and he's just like really friendly old man, like super friendly. And he's like, come in. Thank you for bringing me my food. How are you? How old are you? And she's like, I'm actually 20 as of today. And he's like, oh, it's your birthday. I would like to grant you a wish. And she's like, what? And he's like, yes, I'll grant you a wish. Anything you ask for. And gosh. I'm reading this. I was loving this story.
Yeah, that's
I was
great.
like, this is so cool. At the same time, you're seeing her like 20 years later. And she's telling this to her friend. She's saying like, this is what happened to me on my 20th birthday. And he's like, gosh, are you happy with what you wished for? And she's like, yeah, I think I asked for the right thing. And he's like, that's cool. Do you feel that it's come true yet? And she's like, she's kind of vague about it. She's like, well, there's still time, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then he's like, can I ask what it is?
Yeah.
And then she just like looks off into the distance and the story's over. What? I want
to know what it was.
That's what I'm telling you about how vague the stories were. I'm like, to me, that's so unsatisfying. I want to know. I want to know what, for me, it doesn't add like a metaphorical resonance to not know.
Right.
So
yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. So anyways, the illustrations were very beautiful. I liked it. I had fun. It's the first graphic novel I've read this year, I think. So it was nice to read a graphic novel. But meh. How'd yours go?
Well, I went in like a very peach forward direction. So I decided to read Eat a Peach by David Chang. David Chang was born in Arlington, Virginia in 1977. In 2004, he opened his first restaurant, Momofuku Noodle Bar, in the East Village of New York City. Over the years, he has opened multiple new restaurants, including one in Sydney, Australia, one in Toronto, and another in Los Angeles. In 2009, Chang released a cookbook called Momofuku together with Peter Meehan. The two of them also co-ran a quarterly magazine called Lucky Peach, which is the English translation of Momofuku, and in 2020 he released his memoir Eat a Peach. Not to mention he's a TV personality and has made many appearances on his own Netflix shows as well as Jon Favreau's The Chef Show. This is a book that I have been meaning to read since last year when I bought it. I bought this at the same...
perfect peach
I know.
read.
It's literally got a peach on the cover, peach in the title. Apparently David Chang is obsessed with peaches, as I learned while I was reading this book, because I didn't realize that Momofuku meant Lucky Peach. And he also made this magazine. Yeah. And then he made this magazine called Lucky Peach. And he's just like, I don't know why he named them that, though. He never explains like where the name came from. But he loves the word peach, I guess. So it was kind of perfect. But this is also, it is a memoir. The book has nothing to do with peaches. And so it was just a nice chef memoir for me to read.
Sick.
Yeah. And I didn't really know much about him going into this. So it was definitely like an eye-opening kind of memoir. But it's kind of a weird book also. Like he explains at the very beginning in the introduction that he kind of wanted this book to be like an or not an introduction, but more like instructions for chefs to like how would you start a restaurant, and like once you do have a restaurant, how do you like make it successful. It was kind of more instructional, but it became like more of a memoir, and so it's now this weird hybrid like in between the two things.
It's kind of like On Writing by Stephen King
a little bit, but I think I
think
think Stephen King did it in a much better way. Like I feel like he was more successful with that formula. With this, I kind of wish that it had just been one or the other. Like I would have liked to just read an instructional, like how do you start a restaurant? I find that very interesting. And like if it had been just fully a memoir, I feel like that would have been cool too. And there was even like an epilogue kind of that was like 25 or something rules for opening a restaurant. And it was weird because I feel like the whole book had those things peppered throughout, but then he had this like definitive list at the end as well.
Right.
And so I was like, what is going on? But all in all, I think it was an okay book. Like if you're interested in learning more about him and like how Momofuku got started, like I didn't realize quite how large of a like industry it has become. Like it's such a large restaurant group, and it's cool to hear how he started and how like, you know, failure was so close around every single decision that happened. Like things could have fallen apart so many times. And so that whole aspect was really interesting. But he also talks a lot about his depression and anxiety and like how that helped him with like opening his first restaurant. Like it really pushed him forward, and because he was kind of like, this is make or break, like if this doesn't work out, whatever, that's it for me. Like he was really much like on the precipice of destruction, of self-destruction. So it was definitely an interesting tale to hear through his voice. I actually also listened to the audiobook for a lot of it because I found I wasn't having a lot of time to sit down and read when I was reading this, and it was good to listen to the audiobook, though I will say not my favorite audiobook I've ever listened to. Like I feel like he was a little bit awkward as a narrator, so keep that in mind. I did find that kind of interesting because I'm like, oh, but he's a TV personality. Like he talks a lot.
Yeah, I've seen videos of his and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. There was something about him reading the book that felt kind of like stilted sometimes, so just keep that in mind. It's not as good as Stanley Tucci's, unfortunately. That was a really good audiobook, but
so we are not Peachy book fans.
I guess not in this scenario. The only other options I really had, I think there was only other one that I was considering. I was also thinking the Manual for Cleaning Women by Lucia Berlin.
Yes,
that one is like a perfectly peachy book as well, but it's kind of long. It's a short story collection, and it is fairly long, so I'm saving that one for another time. But yeah, that was my only other option. Maybe it would have been a better option, but I am glad that I read this. And like, I do think it is the peachiest book I own, so I kind of had to.